Is this supposed to be your nickname? Juicebox? Really? The question hung in the air. Captain Johnson stood tall, his chest puffed out. His Marine uniform was perfect. The dark blue coat was clean. The gold buttons shined under the bright lights of the eating hall. The red lines were sharp. In his hand, he held an old brass lighter. He had taken it off the table. He flipped it over. On the back was writing, Juicebox. Around the table, the captain's friends laughed. They were all officers dressed for the big party tonight. They all had perfect haircuts. They felt like they were the best. Sitting across from them was an old man named Eddie. Eddie was 82 years old. He looked worn out by time. He wore an old blue denim shirt with pearl snap buttons and faded jeans with worn-out work boots. His clothes looked like something a farmer or rancher would wear. Over his shirt, he had a tan canvas work jacket with patches on the elbows. He sat hunched over a plastic tray. On it was half-eaten meatloaf and a cup of cold black coffee. He didn't reach for the lighter. He didn't look at the captain. He just stared at his coffee. His hands rested on the table. They were big hands with spots and scars. His right hand shook a little. "I asked you a question, old man," Captain Johnson said. His smile was mean. He tossed the lighter up and caught it. "You walk into a Marine eating hall looking like you just came from the barn. You're taking up a table meant for real soldiers. And you have a lighter that says juice box. What did you do? Drive the supply truck? Did you hand out juice boxes in the back?" One of the young officers leaned in. "Maybe he was the water boy, sir. Very important job. Keeping the boys hydrated." The table laughed again. The eating hall was busy with noise and talking, but the area around their table got quiet. Other Marines were watching. Some looked uncomfortable. Others watched like kids watching a schoolyard fight. Eddie finally lifted his head. His eyes were watery blue with deep wrinkles around them. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "I would like my lighter back, please," Eddie said. His voice was rough and scratchy, but clear. Captain Johnson closed his fist around the brass lighter. "You'll get it back when I decide you're allowed to be here. I've seen a lot of fake veterans lately. Old guys buying jackets at thrift stores, coming onto base to get free food, pretending they were soldiers. You have no ID showing. You're not in uniform. And honestly, you smell bad for a place where officers are eating." "I have permission," Eddie said simply. "From who? The gate guard you paid 20? Captain Johnson scoffed. He leaned down, putting both hands on the table, getting in Eddie's face. The smell of expensive cologne washed over the old man. "This base is for Marines, real Marines, men who follow the rules. Look at me. Look at my men. Then look at yourself. Do you think you belong at this table?" Eddie slowly reached into his breast pocket. Right away the mood changed. The laughing stopped. Captain Johnson's hand dropped to his waist. A reflex. His friends got tense, ready to jump. Eddie moved very slowly because of his old joints. He pulled out not a weapon, but a folded napkin with grease stains. He wiped the corner of his mouth, folded the napkin again, and placed it next to his tray. "I belong where I sit, Captain," Eddie said quietly, "and I earned this seat before you were born." Captain Johnson's face turned red. The insult was quiet, but it hit hard. He stood up straight. He felt everyone in the room watching him. He couldn't let an old man talk back to him in front of his men. "Get up," Captain Johnson ordered, pointing to the door. "You're leaving now, or I'm having the military police drag you out, and I'm keeping the lighter as proof. Juice box. What a joke." Eddie didn't move. He looked at the lighter in Captain Johnson's hand. For a second, the bright light seemed to flicker. The smell of floor cleaner and meatloaf disappeared. It was replaced by the hot smell of machine oil and blood. In that second, Eddie wasn't in an eating hall. He was strapped into a shaking, screaming helicopter. The helicopter was jumping like a herd animal. The front window was gone, shot out by bullets. The control panel had red warning lights everywhere. The control stick was fighting him, shaking so hard it felt like it would break the bones in his left arm. Through the headset, the noise was loud, mixed with the scream of the tail rotor. He looked down at his flight suit. It was soaked, not with sweat, but with pinkish red oil spraying from the overhead line. It was covering him, blinding him, making the controls slippery. "Juice box!" the radio man had screamed over the radio, his voice cracking with fear. "You're leaking everywhere. You're pouring fluid." I ain't dead yet, Eddie had roared back, blinking the stinging fluid out of his eyes as the trees rushed up. Just keep the guns firing. The memory snapped shut. Eddie blinked. The eating hall came back. The shaking in his right hand had stopped. His knuckles were white. He looked at Captain Johnson, really looked at him, seeing not the rank, but the boy under the uniform. I'm not leaving until I finish my coffee, Eddie said. Captain Johnson let out a sharp breath. He turned to the biggest Marine in the group, a sergeant who looked like he was made of stone. Sergeant, take this civilian off the base. Use force if he fights back. As the sergeant stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, the air got heavy. But 3 tables away, a young Marine named Tommy was frozen with food in his mouth. Tommy wasn't part of the officers' group. He was just a regular soldier grabbing a quick meal. But Tommy loved history. He had been watching the old man since he sat down. He had noticed something the captain missed. When Eddie reached for his napkin, his canvas jacket flap fell open for a second. Tommy saw the inside. It wasn't normal. There was a faded silk map sewn into it, and pinned to the inner pocket was a small, old metal pin. It wasn't a normal ribbon. It was a set of tiny wings, the special kind from a legendary group that didn't officially exist. They flew missions that command didn't want written down. Tommy looked at the lighter in the captain's hand. Juice box. The name triggered a memory from a history class. The name had stuck because it sounded so stupid, until the teacher explained it. Panic shot through Tommy's chest. He dropped his fork. The metal clanged loudly. He jumped out of his seat and ran for the exit, sprinting into the hallway. He needed a phone. Tommy grabbed a wall phone. His fingers shook as he dialed. Command desk, Sergeant Williams speaking. Sergeant, this is Marine Tommy from Echo Company. I need to speak to General Carter immediately. It's an emergency in the eating hall. Emergency? Tommy, if this is a joke. It's not a joke, Tommy said. There's a captain bothering an old veteran. He's about to remove him. The captain took his lighter. It says juice box on it. Silence on the other end. Deep silence. Then the sergeant's voice came back, totally different, sharp and breathless. Did you say the lighter says juice box? Yes, Sergeant. The old man is old. Blue denim shirt. Work boots. Don't let them touch him, the sergeant ordered, his voice rising. Do not let them lay a hand on him. I'm connecting you to the general. Stay on the line. At General's office. A mile away, General Carter was fixing his tie in the mirror. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Then his office door flew open. His helper looked pale. Sir, it's the eating hall. Someone has Eddie Thompson. General Carter froze. Eddie? He's here? I thought he wasn't coming until the ceremony tonight. He came early to eat, sir. A captain, Captain Johnson, is trying to arrest him for being a fake veteran. He took his lighter, the juice box lighter. General Carter's face went from calm to pure anger in a heartbeat. Get the car, he barked. No, forget the car. We run. It's faster. And tell the military police, if anyone touches Mr. Thompson, I will have their ranks stripped. Back in the eating hall, the sergeant had a hand on Eddie's shoulder. Eddie sat still, his body stiff, his eyes locked on Captain Johnson. I'm asking you one last time, Captain, Eddie said, his voice low. Give me my lighter and let me eat in peace. You don't know what you're doing. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, Captain Johnson sneered. I'm taking out the trash. Sergeant, pick him up. The sergeant tightened his grip. Let's go, old man. You're hurting yourself, son, Eddie whispered. Captain Johnson laughed, a harsh, mean sound. You threaten me? You threaten an officer? That's assault. I want this man in handcuffs. He turned to the crowd. This is what happens when we let our standards slip. We tolerate fakes. Not on my watch. He held up the lighter. This is a joke. A nickname is earned in blood, not bought at a pawn shop. Juice box. It's pathetic. The doors to the eating hall didn't just open. They exploded inward. Bang! The sound was like thunder. The whole room went silent. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was not military police. It was a group of high-ranking officers. At the center was General Carter, breathing hard from running, his face purple with anger. Behind him were two colonels and the sergeant major of the base. The room snapped to attention. Chairs scraped as Marines jumped to their feet. Captain Johnson spun around. His face shifted from cocky to confused to smug. He thought they were here to support him. "General," Captain Johnson called out, saluting. "Sir, I have the situation under control. I caught a civilian fake pretending to be a veteran." General Carter didn't return the salute. He didn't even look at Captain Johnson. He walked right through him, his shoulder hitting the captain hard enough to knock him off balance. Captain Johnson stumbled. His mouth opened, but the words died as he watched the three-star general drop to one knee beside the old man in the denim shirt and work boots. The entire eating hall was silent. You could hear the refrigerators humming. "Eddie," General Carter said, his voice gentle, filled with deep respect. "I am so sorry. We were waiting for you at headquarters. I didn't know you came in here." Eddie looked at the general, then at the sergeant who had pulled his hand away fast. "I just wanted some meatloaf, Tom," Eddie said, a small tired smile on his lips. "It used to be better in '68. "I'll fire the cook myself," General Carter joked weakly, though his eyes were angry. He stood up and turned slowly to face Captain Johnson. Captain Johnson was pale. He was beginning to realize he had made a huge mistake. "Sir, He had no ID. He was out of uniform. He has that lighter." General Carter held out his hand. "Give it to me." Captain Johnson placed the lighter in the general's palm with shaking fingers. General Carter looked at it. His thumb brushed the word, "just sort Chupmois." He looked up at the room. "Do you know who this man is?" General Carter asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Captain Johnson stammered. "No, sir." He refused to say. "His name is Major Eddie Thompson, USMC, retired," General Carter said, his voice rising. "Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 clusters, Purple Hearts, I lose count. And you mocked his nickname." Captain Johnson swallowed hard. "Sir, Juice Box. It sounded..." General Carter stepped closer until they were nose to nose. "You thought it was funny? You thought it was soft?" General Carter held up the lighter. In 1968, during the battle at Khe Sanh, Hill 881 was cut off, surrounded by 2 enemy groups. They were out of ammo, out of water, out of blood plasma. The weather was terrible. No helicopters were flying. Command said, "Stay grounded." General Carter pointed to Eddie, who had gone back to sipping his cold coffee. Major Thompson stole a helicopter. He loaded it with crates of plasma and ammo. He flew alone into a storm under heavy gunfire. By the time he reached the hill, his helicopter had been hit 40 times. The oil lines were cut. The fuel lines were hit. The general's voice cracked with emotion. He was spraying oil and fuel into the cockpit. He was soaked in it. It was burning his eyes, his skin. He was flying a bomb. When he talked on the radio to the guys on the ground, he didn't ask for directions. He told them he was leaking juice everywhere, but he was bringing the supplies. General Carter turned to the room. He hovered over that hill for 20 minutes, taking fire, kicking crates out himself because he had no crew. The Marines on the ground said the helicopter looked like a squeezed juice box, dripping fluids from every hole. He didn't leave until every crate was on the ground. He crashed 2 miles out, broke his back, crawled 3 miles back carrying the radio. General Carter turned back to Captain Johnson. "He saved 200 Marines that day. He's the reason my father came home to have me. He is the juice box, and you tried to throw him out." Captain Johnson looked like he wanted to throw up. All color drained from his face. The officers behind him stared at the floor. The sergeant who had touched Eddie looked like he wanted to cut his own hand off. General Carter wasn't finished. "You're a disgrace to that uniform, Captain. You mistook shine for discipline and pride for arrogance. You saw an old man and saw a target. You didn't see the history. You didn't see the sacrifice." General Carter turned to the sergeant major. "Take this captain's name. Suspend his command. Get his friends out of my sight." "Yes, sir," the sergeant major barked. Captain Johnson opened his mouth, but Eddie spoke first. "Tom," Eddie said. General Carter turned immediately, his face softening. "Yes, Eddie." "Don't end him," Eddie said. He pointed to the empty chair across from him. "Just make him sit." General Carter looked confused. "Eddie, he needs to learn, not burn," Eddie said, his voice steady. "He's young. He's dumb. He thinks the uniform makes the Marine. Let him sit. Let him drink coffee with me. General Carter stared at Eddie for a long moment, then nodded. He looked at Captain Johnson. You heard the Major. Sit down. Captain Johnson looked terrified. This was worse than being yelled at. He sank into the plastic chair. His perfect uniform suddenly felt heavy and stupid. General Carter placed the lighter gently on the table. Then he stood at attention. He gave a slow, perfect salute. One by one, the colonels, the sergeant major, and then the entire eating hall. Cooks, soldiers, officers, stood and saluted. Eddie didn't salute back. He just nodded, embarrassed by the attention. He flicked the lighter open. The flame flared up strong. He touched it to the rim of his coffee cup for a second, staring at the fire. For a moment, the flash took him back, not to the crash, but to the moment before, to the feeling of the control stick in his hand, the smell of the fluid, the absolute certainty that he was going to die, and the absolute refusal to let that stop him. He remembered the voice of the young Marine on the radio on Hill 881. God bless you, juice box. You're raining life down here. Eddie snapped the lighter shut. The sound was sharp, a period at the end of a sentence. The room relaxed, but the atmosphere had changed. It was sacred ground now. General Carter squeezed Eddie's shoulder and stepped back. Eddie looked at Captain Johnson. The captain was shaking. He couldn't meet the old man's eyes. Drink your coffee, son, Eddie said gently. I'm sorry, sir, Captain Johnson whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to know, Eddie said. You were supposed to look. Eddie took a sip of his cold coffee. It tasted terrible, but it tasted like life. You see this lighter? Eddie pushed it toward the center of the table. I didn't get this because I was a hero. I got it because I was leaking. I was broken, but I kept flying. That's the job. It ain't about how shiny your buttons are, Captain. It's about what you carry inside when the tank is empty. Captain Johnson nodded, tears in his eyes. He took off his hat and set it on the table. He unbuttoned his coat. He looked human again. Tell me, sir, Captain Johnson asked softly. Tell me about the hill. Eddie smiled. For the first time, the years seemed to melt away from his face. He leaned in. Well, it started with a broken fuel line and a lot of bad decisions. The eating hall went about its business, but the noise was lower, more respectful. At table 12, a young captain sat listening to an old man in a denim shirt and work boots, learning the lesson that every Marine eventually learns. The most dangerous thing on the battlefield isn't the weapon you can see, but the spirit you can't. The next day, a note went out from General Carter. It said all officers had to spend time at the local Veterans Center, listening, not talking. They called it KIRO, the Juice Box Protocol. Captain Johnson was not fired, thanks to Eddie's help, but he was moved to a training unit. He spent the next 2 years teaching young officers the importance of getting supplies to the front lines, no matter the cost. He was never seen mocking a veteran again. Years later, Captain Johnson became known as the strongest supporter of old veterans on the entire base. 2 weeks later, Eddie was sitting on his porch watching the sun go down. A car pulled up. It was Captain Johnson in normal clothes. He walked up carrying a small wrapped box. He didn't say much. He just handed the box to Eddie. Inside was a display case. It held a small sealed bottle of red hydraulic fluid and a piece of metal from a recovered helicopter. Wreck, the sign read, to Juice Box, who poured it all out so we could come home. Eddie looked at the young man and nodded. They sat on the porch in silence, watching the day fade. 2 Marines sharing the quiet that only those who understand the cost of service can truly appreciate. If this story reminded you that heroes often walk among us in quiet ways, please like and share this video. Subscribe for more stories of courage and sacrifice.